discover why children master languages effortlessly while adults struggle, and how stories can help you learn like a child again. Have you ever found yourself stuck in your English learning journey, spending hours memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary lists, yet still freezing up when it's time to actually speak? Or perhaps you've reached that frustrating plateau where despite your efforts you feel like you're not making progress anymore. If this sounds familiar, you're certainly not alone. And today, I'm going to share a powerful approach that might just transform your relationship with the English language forever. Welcome to LMJ English, where we explore effective and enjoyable ways to master English. I'm thrilled to guide you through the fascinating world of story-based language learning, a method that taps into the brain's natural learning mechanisms and makes your English journey not just more effective, but genuinely enjoyable. Before we dive into how stories can revolutionize your language learning experience, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. By joining our community, you'll gain access to proven strategies that can help you break through those language barriers and finally achieve the English fluency you've been working toward. Now, let's discover how the ancient art of storytelling can become your most powerful ally in mastering English. The power of storytelling for English learning. Do you remember how you learned your first language? You probably don't, because you didn't study grammar rules or memorize vocabulary lists as a baby. Instead, you were immersed in a world of meaningful communication where language served a purpose, connecting with others, understanding stories, and making sense of your environment. This natural approach to language acquisition is precisely what makes storytelling such a powerful tool for English learners at any age. For most language learners, the journey is filled with frustration and self-doubt. You might recognize the cycle, studying grammar rules that seem to evaporate from your mind when you actually need them, memorizing vocabulary that never feels natural when you try to use it, or practicing conversations that feel stilted and artificial. Traditional language education often emphasizes memorization and rule following over authentic communication, leaving many learners feeling stuck, discouraged, and wondering if they simply lack the language gene. The reality is that our brains aren't designed to learn languages through abstract rules and isolated word lists. Neuroscience research has shown that language acquisition happens most effectively when it's meaningful, contextual, and emotionally engaging, all qualities that stories naturally provide. When you engage with a compelling story, your brain processes language differently than when studying grammar books. Rather than consciously memorizing structures, you begin to internalize patterns naturally, just as you did with your native language. Stories create an immersive environment where language comes alive. Instead of studying the past tense as a concept, you experience it as characters embark on adventures. Rather than memorizing adjective lists, you absorb descriptive language as authors paint vivid scenes in your mind. This contextualized learning mirrors how children acquire language, not through rules, but through meaningful exposure in situations that matter to them. The emotional component of storytelling significantly enhances this learning process. When you feel emotionally connected to characters or situations in a story, your brain releases dopamine and other neurochemicals that enhance memory formation. Research has consistently shown that information learned in an emotional context is remembered more effectively than neutral information. This explains why you might still remember phrases from a moving film you watched years ago, while vocabulary memorized last week has already faded. Perhaps most importantly, stories transform language learning from a chore into a pleasure. When You're genuinely interested in discovering what happens next in a narrative. Language acquisition becomes a byproduct of an enjoyable activity rather than the primary focus. This shift in perspective can be revolutionary for learners who have developed negative associations with language study after years of drills and tests. The beauty of story-based learning is its accessibility. No matter your current level, interests, or learning style, there are stories that can meet you where you are and guide you forward. From simplified graded readers for beginners to authentic literature for advanced learners, from ancient myths to contemporary blogs, from written text to audiobooks and videos, the world of storytelling offers endless pathways to English fluency. As we explore this approach together, remember that story-based learning isn't about abandoning all structure or avoiding grammar entirely. Rather, it's about approaching language holistically, understanding that rules and vocabulary serve the larger purpose of meaningful communication. By placing stories at the center of your English journey, you're not taking a shortcut. You're actually aligning your learning process with how your brain naturally acquires language. How stories improve your English. One of the most powerful aspects of learning through stories is how they naturally expand your vocabulary in meaningful contexts. Traditional vocabulary learning often involves memorizing word lists with translations or definitions, a method that frequently leads to short-term retention at best. When you encounter new words in stories, however, you experience them as integral parts of a meaningful whole. Consider the difference between memorizing the word devastated with its definition versus encountering it in a sentence like after. Losing the championship game in the final seconds, Mark sat devastated in the locker room, unable to hold back tears. In the story context, you don't just learn the definition, you understand the emotional weight, appropriate usage, and even the situations where this word naturally appears. This rich multidimensional understanding creates stronger neural connections, making the word far more likely to stick in your long-term memory. Stories also provide repeated exposure to vocabulary in varied contexts, a key factor in deep learning. Research shows that learners typically need to encounter a word 10-12 times before it becomes part of their active vocabulary. Well-crafted stories naturally incorporate important words multiple times, often in slightly different contexts, providing this crucial repetition without the tedium of flashcards or drills. Beyond individual words, stories expose you to collocations, words that naturally go together, idioms, phrasal verbs, and other word combinations that are essential for natural-sounding English but difficult to learn in isolation. When you read phrases like break the silence, heavy rain, or catch someone's attention repeatedly in meaningful contexts, you begin to internalize these patterns automatically. Grammar learning undergoes a similar transformation through storytelling. Rather than studying abstract rules that feel disconnected from real communication, you see grammar patterns in action, serving their purpose in creating meaning. This contextual exposure helps you develop what linguists call a feel for the language, an intuitive sense of what sounds right, even if you can't always articulate the specific rule. Take the present perfect tense, for instance, a notoriously challenging concept for many English learners. Instead of memorizing that it's formed with have, has plus past participle and used for actions that started in the past and continue to the present, you might encounter sentences like, she has lived in London for 10 years and still loves discovering new corners of the city. Through repeated exposure to such patterns in meaningful contexts, You begin to develop an intuitive understanding of when and how to use this tense appropriately. The beauty of this approach is that it reduces the anxiety that often accompanies grammar learning. Many learners develop what linguists call an affective filter, emotional barriers that actually inhibit language acquisition when they feel stressed or worried about making mistakes. When grammar is embedded in engaging stories, learners often absorb complex structures without the anxiety that typically accompanies formal grammar study. Fluency, that elusive quality of speaking naturally and smoothly, also develops more effectively through stories. Traditional language education often treats language as isolated components, vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, that students are expected to somehow assemble in real time during conversation. This approach tends to create hesitant speakers who mentally translate or search for rules before speaking. Stories demonstrate how these components flow together naturally. By experiencing the rhythm of English narrative, dialogue, and description, you internalize the natural cadence of the language. You observe how ideas connect through transitional phrases, how conversations unfold with questions and responses, and how descriptions build through careful word choice. This holistic exposure helps you develop what linguists call chunking, the ability to process and produce language in meaningful phrases rather than individual words. Listening comprehension improves dramatically through regular exposure to stories, especially when you can both read and listen simultaneously. This dual input approach helps you connect the written word with its spoken form, improving your ability to recognize words in the flow of natural speech. As your brain becomes accustomed to the patterns and rhythms of English storytelling, you'll find yourself understanding more with less conscious effort. Perhaps most importantly, stories provide a framework for developing your own expression in English. As you absorb the language patterns from stories you enjoy, you gradually build a repertoire of expressions, sentence structures, and narrative techniques that you can adapt for your own communication. This process mirrors how native speakers develop their language abilities, not by memorizing rules, but by internalizing patterns from the language they experience around them, choosing the right stories. Finding the perfect stories for your English learning journey is a deeply personal process. What works wonderfully for one learner might be completely unsuitable for another. The most important factor is genuine interest. When you're truly engaged with a story's content, you'll willingly overcome language challenges to discover what happens next. This intrinsic motivation is far more powerful than any external study technique. Start by reflecting on what captures your interest in your native language. Are you drawn to mystery and suspense? Do you enjoy historical narratives that transport you to different eras? Perhaps you're fascinated by biographies of remarkable individuals, or maybe science fiction that explores alternative realities catches your imagination. Whatever genres you naturally gravitate toward, seek out similar content in English. Your existing interest in the subject matter will fuel your perseverance through challenging language. The second crucial consideration is finding material at an appropriate language level. The ideal stories for language acquisition should be challenging enough to stretch your abilities, but not so difficult that they become frustrating. Linguist Stephen Krashen describes this as I+1. Input that's just one step beyond your current competence level. Practically speaking, this means you should understand roughly 80–95% of the vocabulary in a text without a dictionary, allowing you to infer the meaning of unfamiliar words from context. Graded readers. Books specifically, designed for language learners at different proficiency levels, offer an excellent starting point for many learners. These texts carefully control vocabulary and gradually introduce more complex structures as you progress through levels. Publishers like Oxford Bookworms, Cambridge English Readers, and Penguin Readers offer extensive collections across various genres and levels. Many include audio recordings, allowing you to read and listen simultaneously for maximum benefit. For intermediate learners, young adult fiction often strikes a good balance of engaging storylines with accessible language. Series like Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, or Percy Jackson have captivated millions of native English speakers while remaining accessible to learners. The compelling plots and relatable characters motivate continued reading, while the relatively straightforward language and frequent dialogue make them valuable learning resources. Digital platforms have dramatically expanded access to appropriate reading material for all levels. Websites like Common Lit, ReadWorks, and Breaking News English offer free short stories and articles at various reading levels. Apps like Bilingwap, LingQ, and Serial English Classics provide stories with integrated audio and helpful learning features. Platforms like Netflix even offer subtitles in multiple languages, allowing you to combine visual storytelling with reading practice. Exploring diverse genres expands your language versatility, as each type of story tends to feature different vocabulary and structures. Fiction typically showcases dialogue, descriptive language, and narrative techniques. Non-fiction introduces specialized vocabulary and more complex explanations. Poetry highlights rhythm, metaphor, and concise expression. News stories feature formal reporting language and current events vocabulary. By sampling various genres, you develop a more rounded understanding of how English functions across different contexts. For beginners, illustrated stories provide visual context that supports comprehension, making them ideal starting points. Comic books and graphic novels offer a perfect bridge between visual and textual storytelling, with speech bubbles providing authentic dialogue in manageable chunks. Children's picture books, despite their apparent simplicity, often contain rich language and universal themes that resonate with learners of all ages. Advanced learners benefit from gradually transitioning to authentic materials created for native speakers. Short stories by authors like O. Henry, Edgar Allan Poe, or contemporary writers offer complete narratives that can be digested in a single sitting. Personal essays, magazine articles, and blogs on topics of interest provide exposure to everyday English in more manageable formats than full-length books. Don't underestimate the power of rereading familiar stories. Revisiting a text you already know well allows you to notice language features that might have escaped your attention during the first reading when you were focused on understanding the plot. Consider reading translations of stories you already know from your native language, or watching English adaptations of familiar tales. This familiarity with the content allows you to focus more attention on the language itself. Remember that stories encompass more than just written texts. Podcasts like The Moth or StoryCorps feature real people sharing personal narratives, exposing you to diverse accents, speaking styles, and cultural perspectives. Audiobooks let you experience professional narration of longer works. Videos, on platforms like YouTube, combine visual context with spoken narrative. The key is finding storytelling formats that resonate with your interests and learning preferences. Building confidence with stories. Perhaps the greatest barrier to English fluency isn't knowledge but confidence. Many learners know far more than they actively use because fear of making mistakes prevents them from expressing themselves freely. Storytelling offers a unique pathway to building the confidence necessary for authentic communication. Speaking practice often causes the most anxiety for language learners, yet it's essential for developing true fluency. Retelling stories you've read or heard provides an ideal framework for practicing speaking without the pressure of generating original content. When you retell a story, you already have the plot, characters, and key events established. Your task is simply to express these elements in your own words. Start with very simple retelling. Summarize a short story in just 3 or 4 sentences, focusing on the main events. As your confidence grows, gradually add more details, descriptions, and dialogue. Record yourself retelling stories to track your progress over time. You'll likely be surprised by how much your fluency, pronunciation, and complexity improve with consistent practice. For maximum benefit, practice retelling the same stories multiple times. With each retelling, you'll find yourself recalling more details and expressing them more fluently. This repeated practice helps automate language production, reducing the mental effort required and allowing you to focus more on expression rather than struggling to find words. Role-playing takes story-based speaking practice to another level by inviting you to speak from a character's perspective. This technique creates psychological distance from your own identity, often reducing anxiety about making mistakes. When you speak as a character, errors feel less personal, freeing you to experiment with new expressions and structures. Try recording dialogues between characters, ideally with a study partner, or create monologues expressing a character's thoughts and feelings at crucial moments in the story. Writing about stories provides another valuable avenue for building confidence. Unlike spontaneous speaking, writing allows you to process language at your own pace, consulting resources as needed and revising your work. Start with guided activities like writing character descriptions, summarizing plot events, or composing a letter from one character to another. As your confidence grows, try more creative exercises like writing alternative endings, adding new scenes, or composing a story sequel. Journal writing about your reading experience combines language practice with metacognitive reflection. After finishing a story, write about your reactions. Which character did you relate to most? What surprised you about the ending? Would you have made different choices than the protagonist? This personal connection to the material deepens both your language processing and your engagement with the content. Online communities dedicated to language learning provide valuable opportunities to share your story-based creations in a supportive environment. Platforms like Italki, HelloTalk, and language-specific subreddits connect you with fellow learners and native speakers who can offer encouragement and feedback. Many of these communities organize story clubs, where members read the same material and discuss it together, combining reading practice with authentic communication. Collaborative storytelling activities take this community engagement further by creating stories together. These might include round-robin stories, where each person adds a sentence or paragraph, story chains based on prompts, or even role-playing games that develop extended narratives through character interaction. These activities blend creativity with language practice in a low-pressure, playful environment. For learners who enjoy performance, creating audio or video recordings of yourself reading stories aloud can significantly boost confidence. Start with short passages that you practice thoroughly before recording. Focus first on clear pronunciation and appropriate pacing. Then gradually incorporate more expressive elements like varying your tone for different characters or emotions. Sharing these recordings with trusted friends or language exchange partners can provide helpful feedback and encouragement. Remember that confidence builds gradually through consistent practice, rather than sudden breakthroughs. Set realistic expectations for yourself, celebrating small improvements rather than comparing yourself to native speakers or more advanced learners. The goal isn't perfection but progress. Each time you engage with stories, whether reading, listening, speaking, or writing, you're strengthening neural pathways and building toward greater fluency. Most importantly, maintain a playful, experimental attitude toward your language practice. View mistakes as valuable learning opportunities rather than failures. When you approach storytelling activities with curiosity and creativity, rather than self-judgment, you create optimal conditions for both confidence and competence to flourish. Unlock your full potential. Embarking on a story-based approach to English learning is not just adopting a new technique. It's embracing a mindset that can transform your entire language journey. This path requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to trust the process even when progress isn't immediately obvious. Like a garden that grows gradually beneath the surface before blooming, language proficiency develops in subtle ways before suddenly revealing remarkable growth. The most successful language learners understand that fluency develops through consistent engagement over time rather than intensive cramming. Reading or listening to stories for just 15-30 minutes daily will yield far better results than occasional marathon sessions. This regular exposure creates the repeated encounters with language, patterns that your brain needs to internalize structures naturally. Think of it as similar to physical exercise. Moderate, consistent practice produces better long-term results than sporadic, intense workouts. Create a sustainable routine that integrates storytelling naturally into your daily life. Perhaps you'll start your morning with a short story over breakfast, listen to an audiobook during your commute, or end your day with a chapter of an English novel. The specific scheduling matters less than finding a pattern you can maintain consistently, transforming language learning from a separate task into an integrated part of your lifestyle. While stories provide an engaging context for language acquisition, you can enhance their effectiveness with simple complementary activities. Keep a vocabulary journal where you note interesting words or expressions from your reading, focusing on items you'd like to incorporate into your own usage. Create a language collection organized by themes or situations rather than alphabetically, helping you build semantic networks that reflect how your brain naturally organizes language. Remember that language learning progresses in spirals rather than straight lines. You'll encounter the same structures and vocabulary repeatedly across different stories, each exposure deepening your understanding. Sometimes you'll feel you've plateaued or even regressed, only to suddenly notice a significant jump in comprehension or expression. These uneven patterns are normal and natural. Trust that your brain is processing language, even when progress isn't immediately evident. Take heart from the countless learners who have transformed their English abilities through story-based approaches. Consider Eleanor, who struggled for years with traditional English classes, but discovered a passion for detective novels that ultimately led to fluency. Or Hiroshi, who built confidence by recording himself reading children's stories aloud, gradually progressing to more complex material. Or Gabriella, who joined an online book club and found that discussing stories with others accelerated both her comprehension and speaking abilities. These success stories share common elements: connecting language learning to personal interests, creating consistent habits, finding supportive communities, and persisting through challenges. Their journeys weren't without frustrations and setbacks, but their focus on engagement, rather than perfection, allowed them to maintain motivation through difficult periods. Track your progress in ways that capture your actual language development, rather than just measuring test scores or vocabulary counts. Notice when you understand jokes or cultural references in stories that might have confused you earlier. Celebrate when you find yourself thinking in English while reading rather than mentally translating. Acknowledge when you successfully infer the meaning of unfamiliar words from context, a crucial skill that develops gradually through story exposure. Create tangible records of your journey that you can revisit when motivation wanes. This might include recordings of yourself retelling the same story at different points in your learning journey, writing samples that demonstrate your evolving complexity, or a journal documenting your reactions to stories over time. These concrete markers of progress provide powerful motivation when you inevitably face challenging periods. Remember that English fluency isn't a final destination, but a continuing journey of growth and refinement. Even native speakers constantly expand their vocabulary, encounter unfamiliar expressions, and develop their communication skills throughout their lives. By embracing storytelling as your pathway to English mastery, you're not just adopting an effective learning method, you're joining a timeless human tradition of sharing experiences and connecting across cultures through narrative. The stories you explore today are more than just learning materials. They're windows into new worlds, perspectives, and possibilities. As your English abilities grow, you'll gain access to countless more stories in books, films, conversations, and personal connections, each one expanding your understanding not just of language, but of the diverse human experiences it expresses. This rich tapestry of narrative becomes a gift that continues giving long after you've achieved your initial language goals. So begin your storytelling journey today with curiosity and compassion for yourself as a learner. Choose a story that intrigues you at a level that challenges without overwhelming you. Read it, listen to it, retell it, write about it, engage with it in ways that feel meaningful and enjoyable. Then choose another and another, building a personal library of English experiences that gradually transform into fluency. The world of English storytelling awaits, and your own unique story of language mastery is just beginning to unfold. As we come to the end of our exploration of storytelling as a pathway to English fluency, I hope you're feeling inspired to incorporate stories into your own language learning journey. Remember, the most effective approach is the one you'll actually enjoy enough to continue consistently. And stories offer that perfect blend of engagement and effectiveness that can transform your relationship with English. If you found this approach valuable, please take a moment to hit the like button and share this video with fellow English learners who might benefit from discovering the power of stories. Your support helps our community grow and allows us to continue creating resources that make language learning both effective and enjoyable. I'd love to hear about your experiences with learning through stories. Drop a comment below, sharing your favorite English stories, how you've incorporated storytelling into your practice, or any questions you might have about getting started. Your insights might be exactly what another learner needs to hear. Don't forget to subscribe to LMJ English and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss our upcoming videos on innovative approaches to English mastery. Until next time, happy reading, happy listening, and happy English learning. through the timeless magic of stories. Vocabulary list. Immersion. Noun. The action of immersing someone or something in a liquid, deep mental involvement in something. Example: language immersion through stories accelerates learning by surrounding you with natural English. Acquisition. Noun. The learning or developing of a skill, habit, or quality. Example: natural language acquisition happens when we focus on meaning rather than memorization. Plateau. Noun. A state of little or no change following a period of activity or progress. Example: many learners reach a plateau where they feel stuck despite continued study. Compelling, AJ. Evoking interest, attention, or admiration in a powerful or irresistible way. Example: a compelling story makes you forget you're actually studying English. Context. Noun. The circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea. Example: learning vocabulary in context helps you understand how words are naturally used. Retention. Noun. The continued possession, use, or control of something. The ability to remember things. Example: emotional stories significantly improve vocabulary retention. Inference. Noun. A conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. Example: reading stories develops your inference skills as you guess unknown words from context. Authentic. AJ. Of undisputed origin and not a copy. Genuine. Example: stories expose you to authentic English as it's actually used by native speakers. Engagement. Noun. The act of engaging or the state of being. Engaged. Example: high engagement with interesting content leads to better learning outcomes. Fluency. Noun. The ability to speak or write a language easily, smoothly, and expressively. Example: reading stories improves your fluency by showing how language naturally flows. Gradual, AJ. Taking place or progressing slowly or by degrees. Example: language learning is a gradual process that requires patience and consistent practice. Collocation. Noun. The habitual juxtaposition of a particular word with another word or words with a frequency greater than chance. Example: stories teach you natural collocations like heavy rain or make a decision. Diverse, AJ, showing a great deal of variety, very different. Example: reading diverse genres exposes you to a wide range of vocabulary and expressions. Framework. Noun. A basic structure underlying a system, concept, or text. Example: stories provide a framework for understanding how grammar functions. In real communication, intrinsic, ADJ. Belonging naturally essential. Example: finding stories that create intrinsic motivation is key to maintaining consistent practice. Proficiency. Noun. A high degree of competence or skill, expertise. Example: story-based learning leads to natural proficiency rather than just test-taking ability. Consistent, ADJ. Acting or done in the same way over time. Example: consistent daily practice with stories yields better results than occasional intensive study. Reinforce. Verb. To strengthen or support, especially with additional material. Example: writing activities reinforce the vocabulary and grammar you encounter in stories. Progression. Noun. The process of developing gradually towards a more advanced state. Example: choose stories that allow for natural progression as your skills improve. Perspective. Noun. A particular attitude toward or way of regarding something, a point of view. Example: stories offer diverse perspectives that enrich your understanding of the language and culture.